While the front of the grid exploded in anger and frustration at Formula One's Hungarian Grand Prix, there was also trouble further back. Aston Martin had fallen behind in the season's development race, leaving Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll to fight with Haas, Alpine and VCARB for the last points. Even with new updates, Aston Martin had a pretty tough time in Hungary. Their problems were made worse by an FIA decision that Alonso called a gross error. On top of that, Stroll ignored team orders that Alonso followed, stealing the final point-scoring position from the Spaniard. But what exactly led Alonso to this breaking point, and could this turmoil spell the end of his stint with Aston Martin? Let's dive into the details. Aston Martin has faced ongoing challenges over the past few months, with a series of ineffective upgrades leaving them in a tough spot. Their season so far has been strikingly similar to 2023. They began strong, looking capable of competing with the top teams, though not quite ready for podiums. But as other teams continued to develop and introduce upgrades, Aston Martin struggled to keep up with the performance needed to stay competitive. What used to be a solid race aiming for a podium finish has now become a fight just to earn a single point. This decline has created tension within the team, which came to a head during Sunday's Grand Prix, but more on that later. In an effort to improve their performance, Aston Martin brought major updates to Hungary. These upgrades focused on changes to the floor of the car. They altered the shape of the flat section between the Venturi tunnels to change the pressure distribution going to the diffuser. The team also modified the tunnel's geometry, floor edges, and floor fences to make the most of these changes. Additionally, they raised the beam wing's second element to use the airflow from the diffuser more aggressively. All these updates were aimed at increasing downforce while keeping drag to a minimum. The new upgrades seem to be working in qualifying, with both Aston Martin cars making it into Q3. However, they still struggled to match the pace of the Ferraris, McLarens, Hamilton, and Verstappen. Alonso appeared to be on track for a lap better than his eventual 7th place when Yuki Tsunoda crashed. Tsunoda's crash happened at the exit of Turn 5 during the final minutes of Q3, with just 2 minutes and 23 seconds left. The crash was severe, with Tsunoda experiencing 68 Gs, one of the highest in F1 history, surpassing Max Verstappen's 2021 Silverstone crash and Romain Grosjean's 2020 Bahrain crash. Although Tsunoda's car was destroyed, modern F1 safety standards allowed him to walk away and finish the next day's race with points. The session was red flagged just 10 seconds after the crash. The decision to red flag rather than use double yellows meant no driver could finish their lap, even if they had passed the incident. This upset Fernando Alonso, who was on a faster lap and had already passed the crash site. Alonso was particularly frustrated because he believed there was a verbal agreement among teams and the FIA that if cars went off track early in a lap, double yellows would be used instead of a red flag. This policy would allow drivers who had already passed the incident to complete their laps without penalty. Speaking to the media after the session, Alonso said, "In Q3, the FIA sometimes gets it right and sometimes makes gross errors. Today they made one because they red flagged when I was in the last corner, which is surprising when there is an accident in Turn 8, but he meant Turn 5. They normally wait for the cars to complete their laps, or that's the spoken rule." The FIA wasn't done upsetting the already frustrated Alonso. With the red flag out, they decided to put all cars into Parc Ferme, even though there were still 2.5 minutes left in the session. Alonso was mostly out of his car when the officials told him to get back in and drive to his pit box. It seems the FIA had initially planned to end the session, but changed their minds when they realized Tsunoda's car was easy to recover, and the barriers only needed minimal repairs. As Alonso and the others headed to the pit lane, they were placed in Parc Ferme. Alonso commented, "They closed the pit lane and put us into Parc Ferme. We got out of the car, then they told us that Q3 was going to restart. We got back in the car, they buckled us in, and because I had no more tyres, I didn't go out again." Alonso's frustration with how the session was managed was evident. While being weighed, he was seen throwing his hat and jacket to the ground, expressing his irritation to George Russell and an FIA official. But Alonso's weekend didn't end there. An issue with team orders during the Hungarian Grand Prix played out differently from the race's final outcome. While Lando Norris reluctantly followed McLaren's orders to let his teammate pass, Lance Stroll refused to do the same at Aston Martin. Amidst the race's chaos, the battle for 9th and 10th places went unnoticed. With 6 laps remaining, Aston Martin instructed Alonso to let Stroll pass into 10th place, the last points position. Stroll, having pitted later than Alonso and on fresher tyres, was given a chance to catch Yuki Tsunoda, who was 3.5 seconds ahead. This kind of team strategy isn't unusual in Formula One, and both drivers are accustomed to it. Alonso's race engineer, Chris Cronin, alerted him to the plan. "Fernando, we've got one more lap to close up on Tsunoda," he said with 8 laps remaining. "But if not, we're going to give Lance a chance." As Alonso wasn't closing in on the AlphaTauri driver, Aston Martin proceeded with the plan, allowing Lance the opportunity to overtake. "We will swap back," Cronin said after the switch. "If he doesn't get him, we will swap back." Stroll received similar instructions at the same time. His race engineer, Andrew Vizard, told him, "Fernando will give you DRS. We'll go past him into turn 1, and then we need to get Tsunoda. Everything to get Tsunoda now, otherwise we'll swap back at the end of the race." Stroll's initial response showed his frustration. "I would have passed Fernando, but okay." Despite Stroll closing in on Tsunoda by over half a second per lap, overtaking the AlphaTauri proved challenging. Predictions suggested that drivers needed to be a second a lap faster than their opponent to overtake, but in reality, it was closer to a 2-second advantage. This misunderstanding of the required lap time differential was part of the reason Red Bull gave Max Verstappen a less effective strategy. As the laps counted down, Stroll got close to Tsunoda, but lacked the pace to make the pass. On the final lap, as he entered the last sector, his engineer reminded him to give the position back. "Lance, if you don't get him now, you need to switch back before the line." With no response from Stroll, Vizard tried again. "Lance, suggest you drop back. Let Fernando pass. He's 4 seconds back." Stroll still didn't reply and crossed the finish line in 10th place, taking the last points position that Fernando had earlier given him. Alonso also appeared to assist Stroll early in the race. After both started on soft tyres, Alonso ran ahead of his teammate in the first stint and pitted on lap 7, while Stroll stayed out until lap 13, longer than anyone who began the race on softs. Alexander Albon said that Aston Martin used Alonso at that point to delay other drivers who had pitted early and help Stroll. "Fernando was playing a good team game," said Albon after the race. "He bunched up the whole group to allow Lance to come in to pit and extend his stint." Neither driver commented on the team orders after the race, but Alonso was clearly very frustrated with the weekend. Reflecting on the race, Alonso criticized the team's strategy. "A bit surprised when we stopped in lap 7 because we talked this morning our car is hard on tyres normally. So if you stop in lap 7, there are 63 laps to do with 1 medium and 1 hard, so it was a challenge from that point. We didn't have the pace, and the strategy didn't help. We spoke this morning. We have to even out the stints. If not, there is a high price to pay if you do a very long stint with 1 set of medium tyres." Alonso's frustration was evident. He added, "It was clear today that we didn't have the pace to fight for anything higher, and then, with the strategy we chose, it made it impossible to recover any positions. We need to look at why we stopped so early and learn from this, because it wasn't the right call." His comments showed his dissatisfaction not just with the race result, but with the series of decisions that led to their current situation. Meanwhile, Lance Stroll did not address his decision to ignore team orders. This incident likely strained his relationship with Alonso. In Formula One, disregarding direct team instructions is a serious matter, as teamwork and strategy are crucial for success. The FIA's decisions during the Hungarian Grand Prix also faced criticism. The red flag situation in Q3, which Alonso called a gross error, raised concerns about consistency in race management. The confusion surrounding the red flag and the subsequent park firm conditions only added to the chaos, leaving teams and drivers frustrated. Inside the Aston Martin garage, things are equally turbulent. The team, which had high hopes of challenging for podiums and even wins, has been plagued by strategic missteps and reliability issues. Alonso, known for his relentless pursuit of perfection, has been vocal about his frustrations with the team's performance. He has reportedly been pushing for changes and improvements, but his suggestions have often been overlooked, leading to subpar performances in recent races. This has only fueled his frustration, as he believes the team is not living up to its potential. All of this has led to speculation about Alonso's future. With his contract set to expire at the end of 2024, rumors are swirling about a potential move to a more competitive team. Alonso has made no secret of his desire to fight for wins and potentially another championship before retiring. He has been linked with top teams like Red Bull and Mercedes, and his recent comments suggest that he is seriously considering his options. Given the current situation at Aston Martin, a premature exit cannot be ruled out. As the season progresses, all eyes will be on Alonso to see how he navigates these choppy waters. Will he manage to mend fences with his team and the FIA, or will this be the beginning of the end for his time at Aston Martin? One thing is certain, Fernando Alonso is not one to stay silent in the face of adversity, and his journey through this storm will be anything but dull.